Today we are at the Portland Boat Show, and in this particular video we're going to be talking about everything that I wish I knew before I bought my first boat. This video is going to be focused on boats that are about 12 feet all the way up to 20 foot with a splash well, and in a different video we'll be talking about the heavy gauge aluminum boats like the one behind me from 18 foot with an offshore bracket all the way up to 28 foot with an offshore bracket. Before we get going too far, I want to talk about safety a little bit. There are two links in the description from the US Coast Guard that talk about the safety equipment that is required for your vessel. It's based on length. Please read and understand the information in these links before you go boating. I also strongly urge you to take a boater safety course that's approved in your state. It'll help you learn the basics of navigation, what the requirements in your state are, because some states have different requirements, and it'll help prevent you from having any troubles on the water should you get inspected. Also, wear your life jacket. Children are required by law to wear life jackets in boats, and it's a good practice for adults to wear them as well. I know people who have been saved by their life jackets. Carry a fire extinguisher and all safety equipment in your boat at all times, and keep your safety equipment in working order. It doesn't work if it doesn't work, and you need to know that it works so that when you need to use it, it actually works for you. You can also contact your local Marine Patrol, the US Coast Guard Auxiliary, or the US Coast Guard for more information. Be proactive about your safety on the water. It will save you a lot of heartache, headache, and heartbreak if you get stopped on the water for an inspection, or if unfortunately you have an incident and have to put your safety equipment to use. With that being said, let's get to the fun stuff. So in this video, we're talking about tiny boats, everything from 12 feet all the way up to 18 to 20 foot with a splash well. You're gonna hear me make recommendations for saltwater or freshwater only. That is because saltwater is extremely destructive to aluminum boats. Some boats are better suited for the salt environment. They're easier to clean. They've got less places for water to get trapped. If we're fishing in saltwater, we want to make sure that we're not selecting a boat that's going to deteriorate quickly in the salt environment. I'm also in the used boat section here. There's a whole ton of shiny new boats out there, but most people for their first boat are going to be buying used. If I can't find a feature I'm looking for on whatever the selection of used boats is here, I will go out to the shiny new boat section. But I'm going to try to focus on the used boats and things that I think are pertinent for first-time buyers of used boats buying boats on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. Now, in these smaller classes of boats, the US Coast Guard requires manufacturers to install foam in the boats, and this is the biggest issue with aluminum boats. Depending on how that foam is installed will determine how the boat performs in a salty environment. And you'll find the foam in many places in boats. I realized as I was editing this, I didn't explain what the foam is for. The foam is for reserve buoyancy. So if you take a wave over the stern, punch a hole in the side of your boat, something like that, legally it has to float the boat with its rated weight and outboard weight on the boat. So it has to, the boat actually has to stay at the top of the water. This greatly increases the chances of occupant survival in the event of a capsize. While I'm out here with my little Smokercraft Alaskan, I figured I'd show you where the foam is at in this one. The foam is in this bench here, these side pods that go all the way down the side of the boat on both sides. And then there's another bench up front underneath the cover and underneath the deck that I built that you can't see. And all three of those are filled with foam. So let's take this, I think this is a 16-foot Smokercraft here. Big Fisherman, it doesn't say the length on it, but this looks like a 16 or 17-foot boat. All boats under 20 feet have to have foam, so it's got to be somewhere. And my guess is we're gonna find foam underneath the floor in this boat and probably underneath these benches here as well. Yeah, there's really nowhere, because we've got the fuel tank underneath here. Or no, this is the live well. We got a live well underneath here. So yeah, the foam has to be underneath the floor in this particular boat. So the foam being under the floor is not a great thing for saltwater environment. I would consider this to be a freshwater boat only because of where the foam is. Look at that, I already had to come out here to the shiny new boat section. So this boat is a prime example of one that would be by design with the foam, from a foam perspective, would be better for saltwater because it's going to have its reserve buoyancy flotation in the benches here instead of in the floor. This is the bottom of the boat. On the other side of this piece of metal is water. So this has nowhere for water to get trapped underneath the foam. And that's the problem with having foam under the floor of the boat, is water always drains to the bottom, and it's easy for water to get trapped between the foam and the hull. What happens is the water can't dry out because it's trapped. There's no airflow between the foam and the hull. Water can't dry out, so then it gets trapped there, and that can cause corrosion. This is made exponentially, it's still a problem in fresh water, but it's made exponentially worse in salt water. Also, if that water freezes, it will break down the crystal structure, or the cell structure of the foam, and that foam becomes just like your kitchen sink sponge, and it will hold water against the hull, thus causing the corrosion, and your boat starts rotting away. Now again, this is not much of a problem in freshwater, and it's even less of a problem if you actually take care of your boat, make sure you drain it and store it inside, etc., which is a whole lot easier to do on small boats, and is one big factor as to why people choose small boats. But if you're trying to haul crab pots into your boat, I would not necessarily want to do that in a boat that has the foam underneath the floor like this boat has. On the bottom, we have right there, if I can get it to focus, there's a hole. There's another hole. There's another one right, whoa, zoom out here. Another one here, another one back there, and it looks like there might be a couple more forming up here. Right there, there it is. Right there. You can see the corrosion starting. And another one right there that has already formed. Guarantee if I get my pliers out, that one will punch right through. Let's talk hull design here. So everybody knows your traditional John boat, flat bottom boat, and those kind of pound. When you hit waves, they pound really hard. Then there's a mod V hull, much like this smoker craft that we were looking at earlier. It has a V at the front, and at the back, it's fairly flat. This one's kind of rounded. Some of them are flat. You'll also find mod V hulls on a John boat style boat where it's very flat angles, but you do at least have a little bit of an angle at the bow. As I'm walking by from the future, this is an example of a mod V hull where you've got the V here, and then it flattens out in the back. Having that V really helps cut through the waves in the chop while you're on plane, and having the flat bottom really helps with stability. So you kind of get the best of both worlds, especially in these smaller boats. This one here, we'll look at this. This is a 20-foot with a splash well. I'm using this term splash well loosely here because this isn't much of a splash well. But this is a true V hull. You see it dips down right here. This one in particular has a delta pad for running a jet or a prop lower unit on your kick, or on your main rather. But you see how the bottom side of the hull has a sharp V in it. And now looking at the front, we'll see that the V is carried all the way through the entire boat. And this one in particular has some reverse chines on it. The reverse chines are typically only found on V-hull boats. They also help with stability because a V-hull boat naturally is slightly less stable because it's not sitting flat in the water and it's not trying to naturally sit level. It will have a little bit more roll left and right, and the reverse chines help not only with that, but also help lift the hull out of the water for better planing speed and better fuel economy. Now, all three styles of hulls have their pluses and minuses. A flat bottom is going to sit shallower. You're going to draft less water than a V-hull. V-hulls will ride smoother, but You cannot beat a flat bottom for skinny water performance, either on plane or trying to get back up into a really shallow area in a lake, trying to go back through a shallow creek. You know, that you cannot beat a flat bottom for that, but you're going to pay a price in rider comfort. Flat bottoms are generally not a good idea in bays or out on the Columbia. I see people with them out on the Columbia, but they're going short distances in and out, like with the dock right there. They're not making long runs out on the Columbia, and if the weather turns bad in the bay, you have to be able to get home, and a flat bottom is going to beat the crap out of you if the wind on the bay picks up and you end up having to go home in super, super choppy water. Now let's talk for a minute about riveted versus welded hulls. Riveted boats like this one, much cheaper to produce. There's nothing inherently wrong with riveted boats, with one exception. The rivets do tend to leak over time. The pounding of the water, the flexing of the hull will make the rivets leak. It's not the end of the world. A leaking rivet is not going to sink your boat as long as you're not mooring it. If you're mooring it, that can be a problem over time, but I wouldn't necessarily let the fact that a boat is riveted, I wouldn't let that fact stop you from buying it if that's all you can afford. Then of course, there are welded boats like this one. All of the seams are welded together. Everything on the interior is also welded. So you can see in the splash well here, they've got welds. There are a few rivets on this particular model, specifically up here, holding the gunnel rail on, but everything below the waterline on this particular model is welded, which has the benefit of not leaking. That does come at a price premium, and as you get into boats that feature even more welding, of course, that generally takes the price up. Boats have been made riveted for years, and you can get out fishing. Just don't overdo it on a riveted boat. Use it on a lake, use it on smaller rivers on calm days. I would not necessarily recommend going out and beating the boat up on a river like the Columbia, or I really would not take it in bays. This is the biggest downside to the fact that riveted boats do tend to leak. If you live in a saltwater environment, you do not want a riveted boat. What happens is that salt water will get in between the rivet and the hull, because there is a hole through the hull that the rivet goes into. And when that rivet starts to leak, the salt water will get in there. And when you go to hose it off, it's not going to wash the salt out. Also, if that salt gets underneath any foam that might be there, that's going to have salt water trapped between the foam and the hull. And we already know that salt corrodes aluminum. My best advice, if you plan on going crabbing or if you plan on fishing bays, don't get a riveted boat. If you are only planning on fishing smaller lakes, smaller rivers, riveted boats can be okay if that's what you can afford, if that's what it takes to get you out on the water. Riveted boats can be just fine. And again, don't worry about a couple leaking rivets. There are repairs for that. They're not difficult repairs. Now, when selecting a welded boat for saltwater use, this would not be my first choice. Reason being, the foam is under the floor for the most part in this boat, I believe. I haven't pulled the floor to verify. I know there's foam in both of these side panels here, but I don't think that's enough to actually float this the way the Coast Guard requires. So I think there's going to be foam underneath the floor, and that's not going to bode well with salt water dragging crab pots into the boat. We're gonna go look at a different welded boat over here. These are generally very well designed for bay fishing. This is a Klamath, and you'll notice it has a huge upswept bow. We're gonna take a little measurement here. So my knee is at the trailer, my eye level is at the point of the bow. Now let's go over to this North River here. Oh, this is a 22. Okay, so this is the same size as my boat. This is an offshore boat. It's a small offshore boat, but it is an offshore boat. Trailer sits about 2 inches higher than the other one on my knee. Look at where the bow is. It's at my nose. So for this Klamath here to have such that high upswept bow, for a lightweight welded boat, performance in a bay, this is gonna be really good. when the weather turns, you're going to be able to use the engine trim to drop the bow of the boat into the water, and it's going, if you hit a big wave, it's going to cut that wave, what, probably a good 6 inches higher than on my North River without it washing over and into the boat. That's a pretty cool design feature on these for bay fishing. Also, we're gonna have foam in that panel, same on this side, and we're gonna have foam up here. I don't know about under the floor. I haven't delved too far into these particular boats, but generally these Klamath boats are, for as far as small boats goes, it's built with bay fishing in mind. This particular one, I just see the sticker here. This is a 19-footer, and this is a splash well boat, meaning when a splash comes over the transom, it splashes into here and then washes back out through. There's a drain hole right here and a drain hole over there that water will wash out of. This keeps the boat from filling. Another super important factor to consider when looking at a boat is the transom height. Short shaft, long shaft, and extra long shaft. That correlates to a 15-inch transom, a 20-inch transom, and a 25-inch transom. So this one right here is going to be, on this Klamath, is going to be a 20-inch transom. That means 20 inches from here down to the bottom of the planing surface. This is the smallest transom I would recommend on any boat. We're back out here in the shiny new section because I noticed earlier that this boat I showed you was a short shaft. So this is a 15-inch tall transom. This boat's probably only going to sit in this much water. What happens with a 15-inch transom is when another boat goes by and you get the wake off of that boat, that wave will come up on the transom. You have 5 inches less freeboard on a 15-inch transom than you do a 20-inch transom, because that's how math works. That increases the chances of water coming over the transom and into your boat. Now, if you get a big wake boat that goes by, that wave could be all the way up here. I have taken waves over the back of my boat from ships going by, on my smaller boats before my North River, from ships going by, wake boats going by, other fishing boats going by, or just a rogue wave. Big boats like this, those things put off a big wake when they go by, or even bigger boats than that. That water coming over the transom into your boat, not a good thing. Never, ever, ever would I consider buying a boat with a 15-inch short shaft transom unless I was trying to find the cheapest boat possible for a private pond that nobody's going to be creating a wake to come over the transom of the boat. Especially in a boat like that Miracraft that didn't have a splash well on it, that's just going straight into the boat. Again, on a long shaft boat with a splash well, especially a proper splash well like this, it's a lot less of a concern. If water does come up over this, you've got an extra 10 inches before water actually gets into the boat and then has to be pumped out. Again, 20-inch transom is the smallest I would ever consider. If you can find a 25, that's even better. If you can get custom ordered to 25, that's even better. If you have to replace your transom and you're also looking to do a motor upgrade, consider doing a 25-inch transom. It is that much less likely that water will splash into your boat. Now let's talk a little bit about transom materials, what they're made of. Typically, in a riveted boat like this one, inside of the transom will be some plywood sheets. We got to talk about something here, because this is a big deal. What you don't want is plywood that is pressure treated. There is some forms of pressure treatment that is okay for aluminum boats, but most of it is not. The cheapest stuff available is not. Some of the chemicals in the pressure treated plywood, especially copper, will eat the aluminum away. This becomes a big problem over time because you don't know what's happening until there's a hole in your boat from the inside. On the transom, we have corrosion, 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 some more corrosion. Now, pressure treated plywood is more of a problem on used boats that are older. I think most manufacturers now have gone away from the pressure-treated plywood that is not safe for aluminum. Most of them, I believe, have gone to the treatment that is safe for aluminum. Still not my preference, just know that. The other downside to wood transoms is they rot over time. Eventually water will get in there. This is a marine environment. Water is going to get in there and you're going to, the wood is going to rot. When the wood rots and you end up replacing it, go aluminum. Now, how do I identify what material is inside of the transom, between the skin of the transom of the boat? Very easy. If you see screws, this has a wood transom. Here's another boat. If you see screws, this boat has a wood transom. If you see screws, oh, wait, this is the welded boat we were looking at earlier. If you see screws, it has wood inside of the transom. I'm gonna show you one that I know for a fact is all aluminum, but we're starting to get into the next video, the more expensive class of boats, that is the heavy gauge. This right here, you will not see any screws in the transom area at all. And that's because it's all welded together. Even though this is a splash wall boat, that's the back skin of the transom right there. These pieces of aluminum are what's holding the motor to the hull. So now we've talked about transom height, let's talk a little bit about propulsion. Jet versus prop. We'll talk about the prop motors a little bit later. Big advantage with jets and why people choose jets is, you see how close this boat is to the floor here? We're sitting 3 inches off the floor, maybe 4 inches. Look at where the bottom of that jet foot is. Maximum clearance as you're on plane, maximum clearance over obstacles, keeping your motor off of rocks. When a propeller hits a rock, it destroys the propeller. When your skeg hits a rock, it destroys the skeg. That's not an issue with a jet. Now the downsides to a jet is worse low speed performance. When you're trying to maneuver in tight areas, the jet is always on. So the bucket right here is actually in its neutral position right now. When the motor's running, there's always water coming out of this nozzle. So in its neutral position, it is directing some of the water down and forward on the boat, and it's letting some of the water go by to the rear of the boat, pushing the boat forward. That keeps the boat still. When you want to go in reverse, this bucket comes all the way up and directs most of the water that direction, pushing your boat backwards. When you want to go forward, this bucket goes all the way down, sits in the shadow of the scoop, and all of the thrust of the water is directed this way, propelling the boat forward. But at low speeds, there's no rudder on here. When you've got the engine in neutral, you can't just turn the motor to turn the boat. You know, if your boat's moving forward and you put it in neutral, you can't just turn the motor to turn the boat. You have no steering without thrust coming out of the nozzle. That's a big disadvantage. Also, if you run over a weed mat, it will suck up into the grate that's in the bottom of the scoop and it will clog the grate, and now you have to shut the motor off. If you have a stomp grate, you can get it out that way, but most of these outboard jets don't have a stomp grate, so you have to shut the motor off, trim it up, and reach over awkwardly to clear the grass and stuff out of the grate, or you have to get out of the boat and reach underneath and do that. That's something to keep in mind. And no, you can't, before somebody says it in the comments, you can't just kick it in reverse to force water out. That's not how jets work. Again, there is always water coming out of the nozzle here. To go in reverse, it's just changing the direction that water is flowing by moving this bucket up and down. There is no kicking the actual motor in reverse on a jet. Now let's go back and look at the props. You can see right here, right away, this boat is sitting on its trailer instead of on the floor stand, for one. But two, you can see the boat is sitting about 18 inches off the floor. And the motor, with it trimmed all the way down, a 1/4 inch off the floor. So that's that far that the whole lower unit is sticking down in the water. So if you run over a log with the whole boat, it's going to hit your lower unit. Big disadvantage. You also can't run in super rocky areas without risking damage to your skeg or the rudder, or the prop. The big advantage to propeller lower units is 1, fuel economy, 2, efficiency with power and control. So when you put the boat in neutral, even if you're moving forward and you kick the boat in neutral, you still have all of this rudder sticking down into the water so you can steer the boat without producing any thrust here. Can't do that with a jet. Most people in most scenarios will have a much better time with a prop. I have a prop on my boat. Again, they're more fuel efficient, they're easier to control, and the jets really only belong on boats that have to run really shallow. That boat that we were looking at earlier with the jet foot on it, he runs a jet for part of the year to run shallow rivers, and the rest of the year he runs a prop lower unit for the fuel efficiency and the control that it has to offer, especially in rough water conditions or big water conditions like on the Columbia and the ocean, where he primarily takes his clients out fishing. Now let's talk about engine size. Number 1 rule of boats with regards to outboards is don't overpower it. Some people do, they get away with it, but 1, it's illegal in most states. 2, it's against Coast Guard regulations. 3, you may not be able to insure it, or your insurance may not cover you if you're in an accident and they find out that your boat is overpowered. All boats under, I want to say 20 feet, that could be wrong, don't quote me, look up the Coast Guard regulations for yourself, have to have this capacity sticker on it that will tell you how big of a horsepower motor you can put on it. This one here happens to have 830 horse on it. That's a good thing, especially in these smaller boats. I always think you should have the most horsepower that the boat can handle on it. You're gonna get better fuel economy because you don't have to run it full throttle. You can run it comfortable, and when you run your engine at 3/4 throttle or less, you get way better fuel economy. On my boat, when I'm running at 3/4 throttle, I'm getting between 9 and 10 gallons per hour of fuel burn. When I go to full throttle, that doubles. I end up getting 18 to 19 gallons per hour of fuel burn for an extra 10 miles an hour. That's just not worth it. So with a bigger engine, you end up going faster at less throttle, burning less fuel, and that's a good thing. Also, if you end up in a situation, you have extra power to be able to power through that situation. If you have following seas, if you're trying to outrun a wave, if you're trying to ride on the back of a wave and you need to stay on the back of a wave, having more power will allow you to do that. My recommendation is always to run at least 2/3 of what the boat is rated for. So in this case, a 20 horsepower outboard, 25 would probably be better for this boat. At least 2/3 power, if not 3/4 to full power, that on these smaller holes that the hull can handle, you're just gonna have a better experience. Oh yeah, and one more note about jets versus props. On outboard engines in particular, a jet motor gets 2/3 of the horsepower put through to the propulsion device than a prop motor does. In order to have, let's say your boat's rated for a 60 horsepower outboard, in order to have 60 horsepower for a jet, you actually have to have a 90 horsepower power unit. That's a heavier motor, and the jet foot is usually heavier. So that's more weight that you're sticking on the back of the boat, less weight capacity that you have, especially on these smaller boats that have horsepower and weight capacity limitations. All right, kicker location. We're not gonna spend too much time on this, but if you have a boat large enough to be able to run a kicker for, say, trolling salmon, trolling for trout, kokanee, whatever, my preference is to have the kicker on the starboard side or the right side of the boat, the driver's side of the boat. This reason right here, if you look at this, see where the tiller handle is on this particular kicker? And most kickers are like this, with the exception of some of the newer Mercuries. The tiller handle is on the left side of the outboard. Look what happens when you try to turn. You hit the gunnel, and that is annoying. So now you have to lift this up in order to turn it farther. Look at that. That's stupid. Why would you want that? If this was over here, that handle can turn all the way in either direction. And if you also have more options of moving around for weight and balance. So if you as the person operating the kicker need to stand in the center, you have the option to stand in the center because the kicker handle is going to be lined up with right here. With a tiller here, you only have the option of standing right there. All right, see, I can only stand right here. If I try to stand here in the center, I have to lean way over with the kicker on this side because of where the tiller handle is. On some of the newer Mercuries, like the one that I have on my boat, that would be less of an issue because the handle would be right about here. Still not nearly as good to me to have the kicker on the port side versus over here, I can hold the tiller in my left hand, or I can step over here and hold the tiller in my right hand, and I have that option of stepping left and right for weight and balance to keep the boat level, especially in these smaller boats. That becomes much more of an issue. All right, now let's talk about how you drive the boat. Do we want a tiller or a console? My choice for small boats will forever be tiller, 100% of the time. The biggest reason I want a tiller in a small boat is because I want as much fishing space as possible, and I want people moving around as little as possible. And in a small boat, space is king. So with a tiller, I stay right here all day. I just sit right here. Maybe I'll stand up for a little bit while we're underway to be able to see, but my station, my domain is right here at the transom. One fish finder, just have, in this case, we only have one motor. On the smaller boats, some of the motors will go down low enough that you can actually troll with them. You don't need to have a kicker. That saves you money. It's just overall better to have a tiller on a small boat. There is one advantage to having a windshield, and this is the advantage to having the windshield, blocking the wind from hitting me. Look at how much space is in that boat. You have so much room to freely move around. For casting for, say, bass or trout, if you're fishing on a small lake, one person up there, one person sitting back here, tons of room, and even room for a third to effectively fish out of that boat. Now let's look at this boat. Well, first off, we have a problem. I, as the driver, have to move from here to back here to operate the tiller. Second problem, now we have to buy 2 fish finders for a small boat. That just adds money that you have to spend. So now we've got a fish finder back here for when I'm trolling, fish finder up there for when I'm driving, preferably a fish finder that's got a map on it, or you can use an app like Navionics or the Lowrance app, but still, you gotta know how deep of water you're in when you're driving. Also, the windshields. When you're fishing from up there, you gotta be careful on your back cast that you don't smack the windshield with your fishing rod or catch it with your line. Not an issue on an open tiller boat. Also, I might as well touch on it because it is a thing. You have small side console boats and center console boats. The small side consoles, you end up with the worst of both worlds, where you still end up having a lot of the wind in your face and you have the console in the way taking up valuable real estate. I would just go with a tiller boat. And then a center console boat. Those do have their place. A lot of times guys will have center consoles in jet boats. That way they can stand up, be protected from the wind while they're underway. It also gives you rod storage up above if it's like a T-top. Those aren't too terribly common here in the Pacific Northwest though. Some guys run them. Most people will have, on a larger boat, I would say 18 foot would be the smallest I would want a windshield on, 17 to 18 foot. Most people will have either a windshield or an open tiller boat. But for me, anything 16 foot and under, tiller all day. Now, while we're talking about the interior of the boat, I want to touch on the floors. There's a few different flooring materials that you'll see commonly. This is the most common. This is a vinyl floor. It's nice because it's very easy to clean. Downside is it kind of can get torn up pretty easily over time. Then it'll eventually need to be replaced. I mean, all flooring in a boat is going to need to be replaced eventually, but the vinyl does tend to get torn up pretty easily if you're not treating it kindly. Then there's carpet. There's not a carpeted boat around me, but this has carpet on the gunnels. Never, ever carpet in a boat, ever. If you buy a boat with carpet in it, just remove it. Do yourself a favor, remove it. All it does is hold water. If you're in a salty environment, you really don't want carpet because it will hold salt water against the aluminum, and salt water corrodes aluminum. By the way, this is what saltwater corrosion looks like. More on that later. Hooks can get stuck in it. Most boats will come with hook-free carpet, but nonetheless, you get fish slime on it, it stinks, it's hard to keep clean. I mean, this boat's got some staining in it right here, I'm assuming from either fishing or crabbing more likely, because they have a crab davit on this particular boat. Don't have carpet in a boat. It doesn't belong in a boat. Sea deck if you must, have something soft, but just no carpet. The other couple of options you'll frequently see are Kusa, which is a composite material. That stuff generally lasts a really long time and is fairly easy to clean. Kiwi grip. I had Kiwi grip as the deck material in my last boat. Kiwi grip is a special paint-on type of flooring material, and it's very, very grippy. I loved it. It did start to chip off a little bit after about 3 years of really hard use. Overall, I was highly impressed with it. The Navy uses Kiwi grip for tread on their ships. It's good stuff. It works really, really well. And then of course you have just no flooring material whatsoever, just the bare aluminum. And that's gonna be great for things like crabbing or fishing in the salt water, because there's nowhere for water to get trapped at all. And also it's less maintenance. So it does generally mean that you have an uneven surface to walk on, but to me, the trade-off is worth it to have an easier to clean boat. Storage options. Some of the larger boats you'll see come with seat benches like this that have storage underneath it. To me, that's okay. It is a viable option. If that works for you, great. It doesn't work for me. I have chosen seat boxes for mine, and I've chosen movable seat boxes. That way I can put them wherever I want, I can remove them. This particular boat here has fixed seat boxes that are welded to the side of the boat. So you can't move these at all. Your storage is left and right of that. And then up here, we've got what's probably a live well that I can't quite reach. And it looks like we've got some bow mount trolling motor storage underneath here. And these are semi-dry hatches. They'll stop a little bit of water from going in, but eventually water will get through there and drain down. Kind of a fake dry hatch. Dry hatches are also the way to go. Dry storage. So you've got this gutter goes all the way around, and you see water goes out through this channel, out the back. So that is true dry storage, as long as this channel here doesn't get overwhelmed. Here's another storage option that's frequently seen. More fake dry hatches that don't actually keep your stuff dry, because there's nowhere, once this gutter fills up, there's nowhere for the water to go but in. But we've got storage underneath the deck here. We've got storage underneath the deck there. I'm assuming that's for fishing rods to be stored underneath the deck. That's a good thing. But you'll notice there's no seat box storage anywhere, and the seats can only go in fixed locations. To me, that's not great, because you can't move people around for weight and balance as needed. What a much better option is, if you don't have fixed seat boxes, use seat boxes that aren't fixed. Just get some custom made. They're not terribly expensive. Second best option would be a seat pedestal like this that you can move wherever you want on the boat, and it can be positioned where you need it for weight and balance to keep your boat level and for it to plane out properly. And one last thing on the motor size, kind of combining, since we were just talking about weight and balance, I want to go back to the motors for just a little bit and talk about the ride of the boat, specifically when related to porpoising. Porpoising, which is when the bow of the boat does this as you're going underway, is caused by two things. An improper weight and balance, so you have too much weight in the back of the boat and your bow is too light, or too much prop. In other words, your prop has too much torque and not enough speed to actually get you going. Or improper, I guess the third thing would be improper motor trim will also cause a boat to porpoise. But the biggest thing is the weight and balance. If you've got a properly sized boat, your prop is sized so that you're just below the red line at full speed with a full load, you should be riding flat. So if it's not, then you need to do something like, if you've got bow mount trolling motor batteries and they're here in the boat, maybe you need to move them further forward, figure out how to move them further forward so that you get that weight forward. You can also move weight around with people. If you've got a big guy in the boat, you might need to, instead of having him sit in a back seat, you might need to have him sit in a front seat. Same thing with balancing the boat left and right. It's not comfortable to drive a boat that's listing to one side or the other. So by positioning your people so that you can have the boat riding level, that's very important. That's why having fixed seats to me is not beneficial, especially in a smaller boat, is not very beneficial, because I can't move this guy 4 inches this way while we're on plane to make the boat ride level. And finally, let's talk about things that you're going to specifically want to look for when buying a used boats. The number one thing is damage, especially on the bottom of the hull. You want to see if it's ever hit anything. If it's hit a tree stump or a rock, there's going to be some noticeable damage. And if you see that, you want to dig a little bit deeper and make sure that there's no structural damage underneath. Broken welds, popped rivets, damaged stringers, etc. All of those things can cascade into more and more problems down the road. If you see a dent in the side of the boat, if it's got some dock rash, that's not the end of the world. Every boat is going to have dock rash, the first time it touches a dock. If they're not running fenders, or even if they are and it touches the dock, it's going to get dock rash on it. It happens, especially in the small fishing boats. Not the end of the world at all. Fiberglass boat that you're trying to keep shiny, maybe, but that's why I don't have a fiberglass boat. Engine condition. You want to make sure that it's had service, it's not leaking oil, and doesn't have a bunch of corrosion on it. Electronics, age and condition. This is big on the price of the boat. So this boat that you're sitting in right now has a very nice modern Garmin unit. However, the Windshield boat that we were looking at earlier, that fish finder is as old as I am. That one is probably a little bit older. You don't want to pay too much for a boat that has old fish finders in it and then also have to upgrade. So take that into account when you're pricing the boat. A nice fish finder like this Garmin can run anywhere from $900 to $1,500, depending on the features that it has. If you want one that's capable of live scope, that drives the cost up even more, and then you still have to buy the live scope. So keep that in mind when you're looking at used boats. Also, of course, the condition of the interior is important. Does it have carpet? Does it not have carpet? What's the condition of that carpet? What's the condition of the floor? Is the floor all torn up and you're going to have to replace it right away? The general cleanliness of a boat will tell you a lot about how that boat has been cared for. If the person has a bunch of garbage in their listing photos, they probably haven't cared about the boat that much. Stains, not the end of the world, especially if it's blood stains and you've been salmon fishing. Not really the end of the world. It happens. But it's just little things like that will tell you how the person has cared for the boat. And the biggest thing to look for with any aluminum boat, be it freshwater or especially saltwater, look for corrosion. I'm going to show you a few points here where to look for corrosion, but if it's been used in the saltwater, it likely has corrosion somewhere. And not all corrosion is the end of the world. Sometimes some corrosion is, every boat that's been in salt is going to have corrosion. Most aluminum boats are going to have corrosion on them somewhere. It's a bigger deal in some spots than others. This seat pedestal, for example, that's more indicative of the care that's been taken with this boat, not necessarily a problem though, because that's not going to sink the boat. But there is corrosion on all of it. It means that this boat probably hasn't been rinsed out too much. Where that would be a concern is underneath here. You can see this, this rivet right here is sitting proud. That's actually not even attached. That rivet is corroded off. This rivet is sitting flush. That one's fine. Same with this one. But this rivet has corroded off and is no longer holding the floor to the stringer. I would be willing to bet that if we remove this floor, we find a bunch of corrosion on the stringers. And that is that not necessarily is a problem, but it can be a problem. If it's a little bit on the top, not the end of the world. You might have some surface corrosion on the sides, but if there's foam underneath there, you could have some serious corrosion issues and pitting, if not corroded all the way away, that could lead to structural issues down the road. And unless you're just planning on using it in the salt for a little while until the whole thing falls apart, I would actually pass on this boat. Another big common point of corrosion on aluminum boats is going to be on the transom here, especially ones that have wood. With all these stainless steel screws, stainless steel and aluminum are dissimilar metals, And so the stainless steel will actually start to corrode the aluminum. And you can see it here around the transom hooks and around the screw heads. You see it right here. This is an aluminum sleeve that goes into the splash well to drain the water out. But you can see underneath the paint right here is some corrosion. And also this right here is indicative of how well the boat wasn't taken care of. Is the lower part of the bracket here has got a bunch of barnacles, and the anode that's supposed to keep the motor from corroding is that needs to be replaced bad. I would actually be concerned about what the internals of this motor look like after seeing that. If this anode hasn't been replaced, I doubt the anodes inside of this outboard have been replaced. This outboard is going to be a wild card on the condition of the inside of it, if it's got some serious corrosion damage or not. Painted boats are also more prone to corrosion problems than wrapped boats. That's because the paint will get micro cracks in it, water can get in there and start corroding. This right here is indicative of that happening. The paint surface here didn't get perfectly sealed, water got underneath it. My boat has it too on some of the painted surfaces. Best thing to do, especially if you're going to have a boat in the salt water, is to actually put a wrap on it, because the wrap won't trap the water. If the wrap gets damaged, it's not going to trap the water. Water will dry out and it'll be fine, and it will also rinse out. Whereas paint, when the water gets underneath it, it traps it, it creates a little corrosion bubble, and then more water gets in there, gets trapped, more of a corrosion bubble, so on and so forth, and it grows. Two more big points of corrosion on aluminum boats. First one, if you're launching in saltwater, carpeted bunks, bad news. You want to have, well, first off, you do not ever want to use pressure-treated lumber for your bunks. Preferably use a product like the Ultimate Bunk Boards. Not affiliated with them, and I actually have never bought them because I haven't had to yet, but anytime I do replace bunk boards, it will be with the Ultimate Bunk Boards, because they're a composite material that won't rot, and it's not going to rot your boat away like pressure-treated lumber will. But carpet on bunks that go directly on an aluminum boat will hold salt water against your hull that can't rinse away without dipping the trailer in fresh water. I would not have carpeted bunks without some sort of rubber cover over top of it. That's what my boat has. That's really common for fishing boats that do fish in salt water. The other big issue here is this paint. You have to use aluminum specific anti-fouling paint if you are going to have anti-fouling paint. A lot of the paints that are meant for fiberglass boats will have, and they do perform better, but it will have copper in it. That copper will eat the aluminum. So you're just like basically painting corrosion onto your boat if you use the wrong anti-fouling paint on your aluminum hull. Now, I'm not saying all of that stuff to scare you, it's just things to be aware of. Even if you buy a new boats are only new until you put it in the water for the first time. And the first time it's in the water is when all of the degradation begins. And how you take care of it, or how the previous owner took care of it, is going to determine how long the boat stays in good condition. And if a boat is in good condition, it can stay in good condition for a very long time, even in a salt environment, if it's taken care of properly. You don't want to spend your hard-earned money on somebody else's rotted out pile of garbage. You also don't want to buy the wrong boat, which is why I shared all this information with you, because I have experienced buying the wrong boat for the job, too small of the boat for the job, and buying a bad boat that was all rotted out from corrosion. So hopefully you learned something today. Hopefully that helps you in your decision-making process. And if you are also interested in some of these mid-size to larger boats, be sure to check out my other video. It's going to be a lot of the same information, but geared more towards these boats. There is some crossover, but there's also a few other things about these boats that may be beneficial to you in the future when you decide to upgrade from a small boat to a mid-size or large offshore boat. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Feel free to ask me any questions in the comments that you have, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.